today we're going to try to talk about, is DEI working? Because it's been a long time we've all been pushing for the kind of inclusion and diversity within people's investment portfolios, and it's been going on for quite some time. And we thought this would be a good time to talk about a report card and where things are going. For starters, just so everyone could get a good idea, what is your total portfolio, and what percentage of that do you have with emerging managers and NWBEs?
For us in Texas, it's a little less than 2%.
I'll go. For New York City, it's 16. So the 16 billion is really for U.S.-based actively managed funds, and so that's 11.65%. But if you look at it as a total, for the total portfolio, it's about 7%.
New York State Common has approximately 9.5 billion as of the March 22 year-end report dedicated to the Emerging Manager Program, and that's across all different asset classes. But we like to think of the real number being 21% of the active managed assets, which is equates to roughly $32 billion, is managed by minority and women-owned managers. So those are the two numbers and the delta between the two are those funds which are either we've gone direct to or have successfully, and I think Caesar had mentioned it, and maybe the people before, have graduated out of the program into the core portfolio, which is one of the key metrics we try to measure managers on.
So, I'm sure everyone in the audience is always curious to know what are some of the qualities you're looking for your managers, and specifically how that impacts minority managers. So, for example, NYSIF gives us five extra points for minority managers when they're under consideration. How do you guys approach that? And is there something special, or are there certain qualities that you look for overall? And how can that help some of the people in the audience in terms of trying to determine how do they get seated by you?
So for us, for New York State Common, like I said, one of our goals as managing the Emerging Manager Program, and I think that's been consistent throughout the history, has been how do we identify a manager that can ultimately graduate into the core portfolio. I think I heard one of the fund-to-fund partners or program partners say that that's their objective. That's also our objective.
The heads of the asset classes make those decisions, but when it comes to graduating managers, I think that's been one of our biggest challenges, and something that I've observed since being there these past 4 months. And so I've been working with the asset class teams and our CIO to figure out how can we maybe create a bucket of kind of direct emerging, or a category that would allow us to do more direct allocations. And not just within our fund-to-fund partner programs, which we're happy with, but we do want to see some of our managers, our strong managers, get more direct allocations.
But in 2004, there really were not a lot of established emerging managers. So a lot of our managers who are now on our premier list, who have graduated, they were new managers. And so we had the great fortune of investing in a lot of the firms that we all know now as being a very successful investment management firms. We were either their first investor or in their very first fund back in the early 2000s. It's also important to point out is that our program is not an MWBE program. It is an emerging manager program. So the first priority is performance. The second priority is diversity. The third priority is graduation.
And we also have a graduation or transition program, a pool of capital they use to graduate some of our managers, private equity managers, into that. And then from there, you can go into the core portfolio. But in some cases, some of the GPs been able to actually skip the transition and go straight to the core portfolio.
So moving forward, how do you see your programs evolving, and what can members of this audience look to do to improve their own, attractiveness to your organizations as they continue to look forward to allocations and relationships with organizations of your focus, especially since you have the reputation of seating so many?
I'll go. We're excited. I mean, we're committed. The Comptroller of New York, Thomas DiNapoli, who everyone is familiar with, is extremely committed. This is one of his core tenets of the portfolio, along with climate solutions and investing. So this is a very, very important program to him, and as a result, a very, very important program to the fund, provided to what Jarvis says, provided that it continues to perform. Everything goes bad. When you're not performing, it's hard to justify any investment. So you have to just continue to perform. And in terms of areas of, I think, growth, we're seeing more direct allocations towards GP staking and strategies like similar to that, or taking a seed investment in a particular strategy.
We feel really good about the program. First, I'll start there, and then I'll cover some other things later. But I mean, we feel like we've learned over the years. We built a program that I think allows us to meet managers where they are. So, now that we have the three-tiered program, we call it our EM 3.0, with the traditional EM program, Select, and then our Premier list, we can pretty much meet managers where they are. So in the first phase of the program, where you're typically between $5 to $25 million programs, we've now implemented more founded sponsor opportunities. So we can help new managers create a track record through founded sponsor opportunities, through joint venturing, and seeding opportunities. So that's an aspect that we haven't had a lot of success in yet, because it's a lot more difficult to take that team and help them build. But it's part of our program. And then of course, as I mentioned, we have that transitionary program where you've been an emerging manager, but you're not quite ready with the fund and experience to take $250 million. So we have that transition portfolio. And then of course, we have 11 managers who've graduated under our Premier list.
Taffi, I know in our conversations we talked about the basket clause bill. I'm not sure how many of you are familiar with that, but I think it might be worth mentioning.
Actually, on New Year's Eve, the governor passed a bill which allows for public pensions to invest up to 35% in the private markets. So we had previously been capped.
From 25.
We had previously been capped at 25%. And so there's an additional 10% allocation that can now go towards the private markets, which I know we're excited about because there are a lot more diverse and emerging managers within the private markets. Will we get to that full 35%? Probably not, as we're going through a strategic asset allocation as we speak. We're already over allocated to private equity. I know Sly is as well. But I would say from 2024, 2025, you'll see a lot more opportunities there. But it's something that a lot of managers in the community and even our team has become very excited about in terms of that shift.
It may on the surface look like a positive, but if you're in private equity and we're already over allocated in private equity, guess what? You're not going to get, it doesn't really mean as much, but if you're under allocated in real estate, it could mean something more to you as a potential real estate allocation. So we're going through, I think our CIO, Anastasia, is also going through a portfolio review to determine how that gets allocated. And that's going to be obviously more top down, not bottom up, I would think.
Yeah.
So, Jarvis, I know a lot of states are focused on trying to protect their interests while at the same time trying to deal with the emerging manager programs, ESG, and all of that. How do you view that challenge in terms of things that this audience has to focus on?
I think there's a number of states in the country that are dealing with this. How it really impacts this program and our emerging manager program, we don't really think it does, because our program is not an MWBE program. It is an emerging manager program. That was put in place purposefully. It was defined that way purposefully so that we could have access to a broad array of managers, knowing that we would encounter, especially in those early days, a number of women and minority-owned funds if we focused on the early stage managers.
Like I said before, for Comptroller DiNapoli, the Emerging Manager Program and the SICS program is extremely important to him. And he's got a net zero sort of target. And he has also a $20 billion target for that program as well. But keep that in mind, his program is very similar to mine, meaning that it's not a separate pool of capital. It's a shared pool with our asset classes, and it's identifying those investments that fit. And a lot of those investments at the moment tend to be more public fund and larger investments because you can obviously get to that scale. And it clearly has more of an environmental bent.
A number of you use outside allocators to choose some of your managers, and sometimes that can be very difficult for emerging managers. Why do you do that, and what do you think is the real value of doing that?
I disagree with the comment. First of all, I think, and there's no disrespect, I think our partners are an extension of our staff. And I think the Common Fund believes that without having that extension, it's very difficult to get to kind of scale. So collectively, the emerging manager ecosystem benefits when you have those type of partners with a fund like ours, which has $260 billion in order to allocate that kind of capital. And then if you try to go down to multiple managers, not having a 50-person staff internally, and to be able to allocate that sort of role out to very capable individuals, minding paying a fee that's hopefully competitive, I think that's a good strategy for us. It may not be the right strategy for every fund, but for a fund of our size, I think we find it's a good partnership to have.
We have 244 emerging and diverse managers in our portfolio. 138 of them are within our fund of funds. So it would be very difficult for us to find the best, the brightest, and the most talented. So we really lean on our fund-to-fund managers to do that work. They do the work that our staff can't do.
I agree. It's just too much work to do for us, for such, frankly, for such small allocations. I think it is important, though, and one of the challenges is managing the relationship. Ensuring that those outside partners understand what our priorities are for how they do their work, making sure they understand that it's not their money, it's our money. And so after they do the due diligence and the work on managers, the final allocation is our decision, and ensuring that they're treating managers respectfully and ensuring that people who do business with us through them are treated professionally and ethically. And that's on us. We need to manage that.
As an emerging manager approaches you, what kind of guidance can you give in terms of the timeline it might take if they're successful in securing $1 of your assets?
I would say, realistically, with legal and diligence and things of that nature, it could take quite a while. It could take a year before you receive a check directly from the fund. I would say that depending on the strategy and the program partner that we have in the asset class, because they have an SMA that's already funded, that term could be shorter. So if it's private equity, where we have Muller & Monroe and HarborVest as our fund-to-fund partners, and global equity, we have Exponents and Leading Edge. In real estate, we have Grosvenor and Artemis. They have already a pool of capital that we've been allocated, and they just have to draw down on it. And you just got to get through that process in order to get access to that pool of capital, which could be shorter, but it may not necessarily mean it will be.
And for those fund-to-fund allocations, it can still take, maybe 6 months to get through their due diligence. part of what we're trying to do in New York City is be a little bit more transparent about where the opportunities are. And, you can reach out to me. I have a good pulse on kind of what our annual planning looks like and where some of the opportunities lie. We have placed some additional funds with our fund of funds managers in public equities. So there is some opportunity there. And we have a good representation. Exponents, Vivium, they're a part of our panel, so you can have conversations with them if you're in public equities.
They were talking a lot about how diverse managers might consider doing more in the ESG space, and that might be a way to, have some opportunity. And I've been at some conferences where the ESG and DEI start to merge, and you go to a panel on DEI and they start talking about ESG and vice versa. And so I was just thinking that I know that the ESG standard for meeting that from an industry perspective is pretty high. And so you're asking firms who may be already struggling in some cases to do something different with no guarantee of getting additional business. And I was just wondering what your thoughts were on that, how that's kind of being merged together.
I can answer. I can answer for New York City specifically. It doesn't, having an ESG strategy does not, give you a leg up, particularly if we're looking at you as an emerging or diverse manager. We do have a very robust ESG team, and the Office of DEI sits within the Office of ESG. But I wouldn't say that we would hold that against a diverse manager if they're not doing as much as a non-diverse or emerging manager.
For Common Fund, we currently do not have a strategy that fits that description. It'd become somewhat challenging, when you think of private equity, public equity, credit, fixed income, real estate, real assets. Some of that may cross over into one or the other. Those are harder sort of strategies to sometimes straddle. I think where you find, and I said this in the beginning, where you see a lot of that merging DE&I and some of those sustainable investments are in venture strategies, and maybe some of the housing strategies as well, real assets. Though, we at the Common Fund, the venture side, like I said, we haven't really been invested in that particular stage of private equity, which makes it difficult for us to even think about that as a part of this sustainable investment sort of classification. So I think in general just makes it more challenging around how do you perform, what's the metric. Ultimately, it's about performance. And if you have a strategy that is somewhat, doesn't really have a metric to measure it by, it makes it more difficult to think about it as a potential investment.
My hope and my conversation with our plan is, at some point, hopefully, these tenets will become a part of our DNA, and we won't need a separate tool to try to measure them or push them. It'll just be part of what we do every day. I might be a bit optimistic with that, but that's my perspective.